Welcome to Experience Talks, the radio magazine for the experienced listener. I'm Cynthia Friedlob. We're in the studio today with Stephen Hancoff, a self-taught musician who has toured the world, about 50 countries, he said, as an official artistic ambassador representing the United States. He has recently completed what he calls his life's work, a 4-volume iBook entitled Bach, Casals, and the 6 Suites for Cello Solo, which is a transcription of the work for guitar, along with a massive amount of biographical information and fine art. Before we talk to Stephen, though, I want to tell you about a show that's coming up that I think you will enjoy. Ernie Silva, who is a resident of ACE 21, a new engaged community that opened recently in Glendale, is doing a one-man show entitled Heavy Like the Weight of a Flame at the Antaeus Theater in Glendale on June 19th at 7 p.m. The show is, and I quote from his promo, a sea green version of the blues. It's a one-man show that is like watching a bar fight go on between our lead character's demons, influences, and aspirations. It's sometimes serious, sometimes hilarious, filled with echoes of Shakespeare, Lightning Hopkins, Jack Kerouac, and your local Brooklyn, New York archetypes and philosophers. Well, gee, that's kind of cool. It's raw, it's funny, it is universally human, and it is, above all, intelligent. So we recommend that you check out Ernie's show. You can get details on our website at experiencetalks.org or call the theater at 818-506-5436. Now let's get back to Stephen Hancoff and hear what he wants to tell us about.
Yeah, let's get back to me.
Let's hear what he wants to tell us about his experience as a musician, a composer, and all-around creative guy. Stephen, can you give us just a capsule version of your history, how you got started in playing music and writing music?
When I was 13 years old, some friends took me to see my first concert, which was the Weavers. I lived in Baltimore, where I grew up, and I fell in love with the music. I got a $15 genuine plywood harmony guitar and stole the Weavers at Carnegie Hall from the local record store, slipped it under my shirt, walked out, and sought to learn how to make my guitar sound like what I heard on the record. When I was done with that, I got another record, and one thing led to another. And back then, those were the days of the hootenannies, and I started playing. And a bunch of really old people, they were college students, but to me they were really old people. It really encouraged me because, I don't know, I guess I had a knack. And when I graduated college, I didn't know how to get or look even for a job. So I finally started teaching guitar. And one thing led to another, and I kept getting exposed to different styles and different types of guitar playing. Then just kept going, you know. I did folk music. I wanted to be a folk singer, and my style was I finger-picked, which sounds syncopated, so people wrongfully said it sounded like ragtime. And then one day I saw this book of the complete Scott Joplin rags. I put them on, some of them, about a dozen of them, onto the guitar, went to a ragtime festival in Scott Joplin's hometown of Sedalia, and all these eminent ragtime scholars and performers came to me and said, wow, this is great. You should keep doing this. I got my first recordings from that. I did 2 recordings of complete classic piano rags that I transcribed for guitar. At that festival, I met the then 96-year-old U.B. Blake, which was really a thrill.
Yeah.
And I did a concert with him. I mean, we didn't play together, but I played, then he played. So we're backstage. He's 96, and he said, I said, how did you get to live so long, so well? He says, well, 2 things. I love what I do and my diet. So I said, well, what's your diet? He said, cigarettes and chocolate. So we're sitting backstage, and this beautiful young woman walks up and says, oh, and she starts felling all over him. Mr. Blake, you're my idol, on and on. And kisses him on his bald head. She signs her autograph. He walks away. She walks away, and Yubi said to me, man, if I was only 90 again, you know. So I mean, he was so sharp. It was such a significant moment to me.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Because, you know, no matter what good you may do elsewhere, when you do it in the arts, you really touch people. And I got that from that young lady and from Yubi. And then, I don't know, performing at the Ragtime World got me invited to jazz festivals and then to New Orleans. So the point is, I never had a lesson. I never had a teacher. And here I am doing Bach, the Bach cello suites. How that came to be, I can't quite tell you. And I'm not somebody who's ever believed in it. But since this is a show about being aging and creativity, as I understand it, I've come to wonder if somehow or another, being the one telling the story of Bach's life, and I'll talk about that. So it sort of became a destiny. It's a destiny, and usually when I do these performances, which are not concerts so far, they're a lot of video, a lot of art, because my iBooks, it's 4 volumes. On Apple, please go buy them. What started off as an exploration of the life of Bach turned into an exploration of life itself. How is it this man who endured such profound and immense tragedy, everybody who ever cared about him and anybody whom he loved, they died. And instead of becoming embittered, enraged at fate, hating life, hating God, whatever you call it, he turned himself into Bach. And I wanted to know how to do that. Not to turn myself into Bach, but to turn myself into somebody whose motives for what I did and were pure, were meant to be creative and to be a gift rather than to be spiteful in the face of rage at fate. So I've somehow or another, this guy who wanted to be a folk singer ended up playing jazz, and I did a couple of Duke Ellington CDs and a lot of touring with all that, with Americana. Turned out to be somebody going around the country telling the story of the life of the man who essentially invented harmony. I mean, think of that, you know.
But before you got to that point, let's go back a little bit to your touring as an ambassador.
Touring was so great. So I got a reputation for knowing about Americana. I got a phone call one day from this woman who says, I represent Arts America, which is part of the United States Information Agency, which is part of the State Department. And we send musicians to represent America, telling the story of American music. And here I had done Duke Ellington and Scott Joplin and Jelly Roll Morton and King Oliver, Louis Armstrong, you know, Stephen Foster. And so we'd like you to go to do 3 shows, 3 cities in Brazil, Argentina, and Ecuador. And you can take somebody with you, but not a bass player, because then we have to buy an extra seat. Really.
Very pragmatic.
So my friend Buddy Wachter, who I think is the greatest banjo player who ever lived, and I went off, and we were a hit. They loved it. You know, we did master classes. We told stories. We played this music, and we came back, and they said, we want to keep sending you. So the best part was, well, one of the best parts was it wasn't Europe. In other words, I'm not against Europe. I just mean it was developing world stuff. We were in South America a lot, all over South America, a lot of Africa, which is my favorite place to visit, all over Asia, China twice. They did send us to Australia and New Zealand, which I sort of consider they didn't need to. But seeing the world that way was the greatest meals, the greatest food, the friendliest people, the people like musicians. They don't like to pay musicians, but they like musicians, you know. So we had the opportunity to, and not only that, but in each country there would always be one performance in the home of the U.S. ambassador, because it was a hot ticket for the diplomatic community. And so we met, and they would always invite at least one eminence, like the country's top novelist or painter or poet or whatever, or dancer. So we got to meet some very fascinating, wonderful, friendly, welcoming, open people around the world. And my address, I don't know anybody where I live, but Swaziland I'm covered. You know.
That must have been an amazing experience.
Truly. And it was like 15 years. It wasn't like all the time. It was like I paid by the day. What we would do is like we'd go like 2 weeks early. They'd pay the airfare. Then we would, what I call dirt bag, you know, $3 a night hotels, and maybe do a raft a river, or do a hike, or hang out in a city or whatever. And then we do our tour, and then spend a couple of weeks at the last country, you know, because we're already there. The expensive part's getting there. so we got to see, like I say, I think about 50 countries. The most recent one, the last one when the program ended in 2006 or 7 or so, was Laos. If you really want to get a bargain, go to Laos. Every woman in the country, I swear, weaves with vegetable dyes, these most beautiful scarves and tablecloths, and you can knock on any door and say, "Do you have a loom?" And they do, and they invite you in, and you can try. It's hard work. Those looms are heavy.
It looks like it would be.
And would you like, for next to nothing, these magnificent things. In Sri Lanka, similarly, they make batiks that are spectacular. It's amazing what people do. But again, to me, my favorite was in Southern Africa. The wood carvers are geniuses. And I bet you didn't know that in Zimbabwe, the world's greatest stone sculptors.
I did not know that.
All over Harare are the most remarkable sculptors that cost nothing because there's so many of them.
Interesting.
I mean, there's people. I wish we'd see more on our news about the gifts that people have. The arts, they're called tapiste. They're wall hangings of southern South America and Chile and Argentina. It takes your breath away to see what people do. But somewhere along the line, I always knew I wanted to get to Bach, and I didn't know it would be the cello suites, because a lot of guitar players have done the lute suites. But Michael Lorimer, who was one of Segovia's students, told me once, check out those cello suites because they're more, quote, guitaristic. I don't know what he meant. But the thing about doing something like that is I'm not looking to be a musical stenographer, taking Bach's notes and putting them on the instrument. I'm looking to create guitar pieces out of the 36 movements so that each piece can stand on its own, yet the whole thing is a cohesive entirety, a whole. And I hope that's what I achieved to do. But I felt that in order to serve the profundity of the music, I should learn about the man. So I started reading all these biographies, and what I found is that nobody wrote anything about the cello suites. If there was something in a biography, it said he wrote them in 1720, and there are 6 of them. And I mean, that would be about it, if there was anything. So I just started realizing that what happened was he was 35 years old. By the time he was 32, he was orphaned at 9. He'd seen 3 brothers and sisters die. He had 4 of his own kids die. But he's got 4 kids. He loves his wife. His boss, he's finally got a really good gig. He's not writing for the church. He's writing songs for Thursday evening hootenannies at the Palace in Curtin, which is a little tiny hick town of like 3,000 people. But the prince, who's Calvinist, loves him and loves music. The reason I mentioned his religion is that he's been working for Lutherans all that time. And Lutherans wanted him to write church music, but Calvinists don't use music for the church. So he's writing secular music for Prince Leopold, who's now his best friend. They go off for a month. He's 35, comes home, walks in the door laden with gifts for his kids, and he finds out Maria Barbara, his wife, has just been buried. She died, and he has no idea why. And I felt like, who wouldn't have been crushed? So that's what gave rise to writing the iBook and telling the stories that I'm telling. Is he goes off, he does a concert for his old organ teacher from high school. The organ teacher, the librettos are, the one piece he does is "By the Rivers of Babylon We Wept," which is, an iconic song, a psalm of exile from God. And then he does one called "I Have Great Distress in My Heart," where he's alone, he's angry, he hates God, he hates life, he comes home and he sits down and writes his first masterpieces, which are the violin sonatas and partitas and the cello suites. And I'm going, wow, how'd that happen? That's really what gave rise to having to do this whole thing. And I concluded that and I'm the only one that I know of who's concluded it, and nobody's in the Bach world of scholarship has laughed too hard at me yet. But this is sort of the crux of what I'm trying to tell people, is that the violin is the voice of Maria Barbara, and the cello is his own voice, having the most intimate and profound conversation with her spirit, because she's not there anymore. And when you listen to those pieces like that, it makes emotional sense immediately.
Yes.
And I think, nobody played cello. Why would anybody write for an instrument nobody plays? I think it's because it's a baritone voice that's his voice. And nobody again wrote for cello solo for 200 years. He was a little ahead of his time. You better watch out because I could keep going.
You had mentioned that you wanted to talk about participating in the arts as an older person. Now, your life has been involved in the arts.
Yeah, well,
since
I'm going to be 70 next year. And which neither of my parents made it anywhere near 70. What happened was I did a show at Tufts University a few months ago in Boston, near Boston. And usually, first of all, I want to say something about the project. I wanted to use George Braque's Bach paintings, and I called Artist Rights Society. I found that I couldn't afford them, the rights. So I started Googling, and I ended up writing to and communicating with artists who'd done Bach-inspired work. So I ended up with art for 350 artists. It turned into the biggest collection of Bach art in the world.
Including
Cynthia is
me.
one of them, who did a beautiful thing called Baroque. You really ought to check her website.
Thank you.
And these are people who've invited me all over the world to hang out. I don't know. We'd like to. So that's the most unexpected part of my whole project. It's like the huge art project. Who knew? Plus, there's 35 videos in the books. Plus, there's a YouTube channel, etc. Anyway, being old. I was supposed to be introduced. I typed out a thing and I gave it to the person who was introducing me, but this person forgot to introduce me. So I went up there and had to introduce myself. So what am I going to say? So I sat down on the edge of the stage, dangled my legs, and said, I'm going to be 70, and everybody in this audience has white hair like me, it looks like to me. So I have a question. Some of the stuff I've said to you today, it's astonishing to me that I'm the guy without any musical background who's gone around the world telling this archetypal saga, this legend of the life of Johann Sebastian Bach and Pablo Casals, by the way, and Felix Mendelssohn, because they all figure into the story. And it's amazing to me, and I've come to wonder how it came to be, and I'm hesitant to conclude that it is such a thing as what people call a destiny, because destiny to me sounds a little woo-woo, I don't know if I believe in that or not. But I did say to this audience, I said, so you are most definitely you're going to live fewer years than you've already lived. So what do you tell yourself about what is your destiny? What was your destiny? What was the purpose of your blink of an eye time on this tiny little cell of this organism we call the universe, this blue-green orb that seems to support life, and we really don't know if there's any other place. What was the purpose? When you are gone and look back down, what will you have said about it? And I heard the audience gasp. And I thought, oh, that's good. The gasping is good because you're getting a reaction and making people. And so after the show and after every show, people come up to me. A lot of times they're weeping or they need me to hug them or something. There's real emotion coming out. And I think it's because the story of Bach is the story of one of these very small handful of geniuses who've created our culture. By geniuses, I mean Plato and Socrates and Euclid and Newton and Darwin. I don't mean the guys on TV. There's a handful of people, those shoulders we all stand on, and Bach is surely one of them. And I don't know about you, but I wish I'd have been one of them. I wanted to, but we can't. I don't know how if they're bodhisattvas and God puts his finger on them, or if it's karma. I don't know what it is, but I felt that that we may as well learn how to live from the people who, I don't want to say have mastered it, but from the masters. I guess you could say it that way. From these true masters who've given us way more than we could ever expect anybody to give.
Now, your whole life has been spent in the arts, being a musician.
Yeah.
A lot of people are discovering the arts for the very first time. They have never tried picking up a paintbrush or playing an instrument or singing or anything, what can you say to encourage them?
Let me frame it entirely differently.
Okay.
Let's say that what you do is you're raising a handful of kids, and you wait tables. Make that your art. It's like, what does art mean anyway? It means that you're trying to get your personality out of the way, and especially your resentments and spitefulness, whatever negativity that's so tempting to grab onto, and just get it out of the way, and do whatever it is that you do in a way that can most profoundly express the deepest part of yourself that you can find. And to find the deeper and deeper part of yourself, it takes only one thing, which is to have a determination inside of yourself to tell the truth about yourself to yourself. I think that's all it really comes. I don't know what Bach would say. Bach would say, give it all to God. But that's a different era. For us, it's like, get out of your way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Somebody may have it in for you and maybe with you, but there aren't any excuses. It doesn't matter. It's still your life, and it's the only life you're likely to have, at least the one you know about. It's not like you have to believe in anything, but we all have a awareness of we are who we are. And for me, anyway, I would like to, on my deathbed, feel like I did the best I could with it.
That's wonderful. Stephen, tell us your website address.
Well, my website is stephenhancoff.com. I've been going around the country doing these 3 Bach-centered stories, one of which is also about how, I'm going to very quickly say, Bach was totally unappreciated in his lifetime. Nobody even basically knew he was a composer. He published fewer than a dozen pieces of music when he died. By the time he died, his music was resurrected by a teenage genius named Felix Mendelssohn through a series of remarkably serendipitous events where his family and Bach's sons had interaction. I'm not giving the plot away. And the cello suites themselves are even more amazing. Nobody played them. He wrote them in 1720. A 13-year-old kid found them. When his daddy buys him a cello, he needs some music. They go through a used bookstore on the Barcelona docks. He flips through the stacks, and there they are. He knows what he has. He says, I knew I had the crown jewels. I couldn't do anything but caress them. And it just happens the guy who found them was Pablo Casals. I mean, what kind of story is that? It's almost like, if you believe in such things, divine intervention. I mean, between Mendelssohn, who I have come to think is like the greatest genius of all, and Casals, I mean, wow. So I've been going around the country telling these stories about these great men. But I'm starting a new one based on my 50 countries. Mm-hmm. My background is folk music and blues and jazz and ragtime. And so I'm singing, doing a show called I've Been All Around This World, which is the chorus from an old Dave Van Ronk song called Hang Me, Oh Hang Me, which I used to sing when I was 14 years old. I got to meet Dave once, and I told him how much he meant to me. He said, that's good, kid. It's going to be a combination of some videos from my travels as well as a lot of storytelling and songs. As I say, blues, folk, jazz, and ragtime.
Going to be fascinating. I'm sure it's going to be great. Stephen, we are completely out of time, and I want to be able to play a piece of music from your Bach project. Okay. So thank you so very much. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Thanks for having me.
Totally my pleasure.
It's nice to put a face to the art.
Thank you. I'm proud to be associated with your project.
Thank you.
We'd like to close with a selection from Stephen's Bach project. But before we go, we'd like to remind you that you can get more information about any of our guests, and you can listen to previous shows on our website at www.experiencetalks.org. Thanks to D'Angelo for his fine job handling recording duties for us at KPFK 90.7 Los Angeles. And thanks to all of you for listening. This show was produced by John Semper Jr. and me, Cynthia Friedlob. Now here's Bach's Prelude to Suite 6 from Stephen Hancoff's masterwork, The Six Suites for Cello Solo, transcribed for the acoustic guitar. Stephen says he considers it one of the greatest pieces of music ever written. Enjoy.